My husband assaulted me during a family event and expected loyalty to protect him, but his best friend broke ranks in a way he never imagined. It was my niece's 6th birthday party, pink balloons everywhere, kids running through the backyard, adults clustered around the grill with beers in hand. Normal, safe, until I mentioned selling my grandmother's china set that had been sitting in our garage for 3 years. Brandon's face changed instantly, that familiar darkness sliding across his features like a storm cloud. "We're not discussing this here," he said through clenched teeth. I'd seen this warning 100 times before, usually followed by hours of cold silence or worse once we got home. But today, surrounded by family, I felt brave, protected by proximity to witnesses. "It's mine to sell," I said quietly. My grandmother left it to me. His hand shot out so fast I barely registered the movement before my head snapped sideways. The slap echoed across the yard, cutting through the birthday chaos like a gunshot. For one suspended moment, everything stopped. Kids froze mid-chase. Conversations died. Every eye turned to us. Then the panic kicked in. My cheeks burned from more than just the impact. 30 people had just witnessed what I'd hidden for 5 years. The careful makeup applications, the long sleeves in summer, the elaborate excuses for why we couldn't attend gatherings, all of it exposed in one violent second. Brandon recovered first, his face transforming into practiced remorse. "Baby, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean that. The stress at work, He reached for me, playing the part perfectly. This was his specialty, the performance that always worked, the apologies that sounded genuine, the tears that seemed real, the promises that dissolved like sugar in rain. I waited for what always happened next. Someone would make an excuse, suggest we all had too much sun, redirect attention back to the birthday girl. Families protect their own, and Brandon had woven himself so deeply into mine that he was untouchable. My father loved him. My brothers golfed with him every weekend. My mother called him her favorite son-in-law. But then Garrett stepped forward, Brandon's best friend since elementary school, the man who'd been his best man at our wedding, who came to our house for Monday Night Football, who Brandon trusted more than anyone. "Don't touch her," Garrett said, his voice cold and unfamiliar. Brandon laughed, that charming laugh he used to diffuse tension. "Garrett, man, this is between me and my wife. We'll work it out at home." "No," Garrett said. "We're not doing this anymore." He pulled out his phone, and my stomach dropped. What was he doing? Brandon's face shifted from confident to confused, to something darker. Dangerous. "Put the phone away," Brandon said, his voice dropping to that tone I knew meant violence was coming. Garrett didn't flinch. "I've been recording you for 6 months. Every time you bragged about keeping her in line, every joke about teaching her lessons, every detail you shared about how you make sure she knows who's in charge." He looked directly at me for the first time, and I saw something in his eyes I couldn't quite identify. Guilt? Determination? "I have 40 recordings, messages, videos you sent me. I saved everything." The backyard went silent again, but different this time, heavier. My father-in-law stepped forward, his face red. "Garrett, this is family business. You don't understand marriage. Sometimes couples argue and—" "He sent me a video 2 weeks ago," Garrett interrupted, his voice louder now, of him shoving her into a wall so hard it left a dent. He was laughing, asking if I thought she'd finally learned her lesson. He turned to Brandon, who'd gone absolutely still. "You showed me because you thought I was safe. You thought we were the same." My mother-in-law made a small sound, her hand flying to her mouth. My sister grabbed her daughter, pulling her inside. The party was officially over, but no one moved. We were all frozen, watching something fundamental crack open. "You're making this up," Brandon said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. "You're trying to destroy my marriage." Garrett pressed something on his phone. Brandon's voice filled the backyard, tinny but unmistakable through the speaker. "Sometimes you just have to remind them who's boss, you know? Like last Tuesday, she talked back to me in front of the grocery store clerk. Had to set her straight when we got home. Nothing major, just enough to make the point." The audio continued for another 30 seconds before Garrett stopped it. My mother appeared at my side. I hadn't seen her approach. She put her arm around my shoulders and I realized I was shaking. "When did this start?" she asked quietly. "About 2 months after the wedding," I said. My voice sounded strange, disconnected. He apologized the first time, brought me flowers, said it would never happen again. My father looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. He'd walked Brandon down the aisle at our wedding when Brandon's own father refused to come. He'd lent us money for the down payment on our house. He'd called Brandon's son for 5 years. Brandon's face had gone from shocked to calculating. I watched him assess the situation, searching for an exit strategy. He was good at this, at reading rooms and finding the angle that would save him. But every face in that backyard had shifted from confusion to disgust to something harder. Even his own mother had stepped away from him. "I need to make a call," my father said, pulling out his phone. His hands were shaking. "Dad, no," I said quickly. "Please, not the police." "Why not? He deserves to be locked up." Because I knew what happened next. I'd read enough stories, talked to enough counselors at the women's shelter where I volunteered during my lunch breaks. The arrest, the temporary restraining order, the court dates, the lawyers, the way Brandon's family would close ranks and hire the best defense money could buy. The way my text messages would be analyzed, my clothing choices questioned, my decision to stay used as evidence that it wasn't really that bad. The months or years of legal battles while I lived in fear, checking over my shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. I have a better idea, Garrett said. He looked at Brandon with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, determined. You're going to sign divorce papers. You're going to give her everything. The house, the cars, every cent in your accounts. You're going to disappear from her life completely. Brandon's laugh was harsh. Or what? You'll go to the police with your little recordings? Good luck with that. My family has lawyers who will tear you apart. Or I'll send everything to your boss, Garrett said calmly. And your clients. And every business partner in your contact list. I'll post it on every social media platform. I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly who Brandon Mitchell really is. The color drained from Brandon's face. His real estate development company depended entirely on reputation and relationships. One scandal could destroy everything he'd built. His father-in-law was the CEO of the largest construction firm in the state. His clients were wealthy families who valued discretion and respectability above all else. You wouldn't, Brandon said. But the confidence had evaporated. Try me, Garrett said. I'm done watching this. I'm done being complicit. He looked at me again, and this time I recognized the expression. Shame. Deep, burning shame. I should have done this years ago. I should have said something the first time you showed me that bruise on her arm and laughed about how clumsy she was. I'm sorry. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. This wasn't how I'd imagined escape. I'd fantasized about it hundreds of times during sleepless nights while Brandon snored beside me. In my dreams, I was always alone, running in the middle of the night with a packed bag and what little cash I could hide from him. I never imagined someone would fight for me, that anyone would sacrifice their oldest friendship to protect me. My brother stepped forward, the one who'd introduced me to Brandon at a company picnic 6 years ago. I'm a witness, he said quietly, to what just happened. I saw him hit her. If this goes to court, I'll testify. Me too, my sister said from the doorway, still holding her daughter. And me, my cousin added. One by one, nearly everyone in that backyard spoke up. Family members, friends, neighbors who'd come for a child's birthday party and stayed for something none of us had expected. They'd all seen it. There was no denying what had happened. No way for Brandon to twist the narrative or gaslight everyone into doubting their own eyes. Brandon looked around wildly, searching for allies. His mother was crying silently, her hands covering her face. His father had turned away, staring at the fence like it held answers. His younger sister, who I'd always gotten along with, met his eyes and shook her head slowly. Fine, Brandon said finally. His voice was tight, controlled. But I need time. I need to talk to my lawyer, get paperwork drawn up properly. No, Garrett said. You do it now. You call your lawyer right now, tell him to draft the papers tonight, and you sign them tomorrow morning. She stays here with her family tonight. You don't go near her, you don't call her, you don't text her. And if you even think about retaliating, I press send on every file I have. Brandon's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles jumping. This is insane. You can't force me to do this. I can't, Garrett agreed. But I can make your life hell if you don't. Your choice. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. I watched Brandon cycle through emotions, rage, calculation, defeat, and finally, resignation. He pulled out his phone with jerky movements and walked to the far corner of the yard. My mother guided me inside the house. My legs felt like water. She sat me down at the kitchen table while my sister made tea with shaking hands. Through the window, I could see Brandon on the phone, pacing back and forth. My father and Garrett stood nearby, watching him like guards. How long? My mother asked softly. Since the beginning, I said. He was different when we were dating. Charming, attentive, generous. The first time it happened, I was so shocked I convinced myself it was a one-time thing, that he was under stress, that I'd provoked him somehow. My sister's teacup hit the counter with a sharp crack. You didn't provoke anything. There's no excuse for what he did. I know that now, I said. Took me 3 years to really believe it, though. By then, I was so deep in it that leaving seemed impossible. He controlled all our money. He'd isolated me from most of my friends. He monitored my phone, my emails, my location at all times. I had to account for every minute of every day. If I was 5 minutes late coming home from the grocery store, there would be consequences. My mother's face had gone pale. I thought you were just busy. You always had excuses for why you couldn't visit, why you couldn't talk long on the phone. I thought maybe you were pulling away from the family. That's what he wanted you to think, I said. He was careful. He never left marks where anyone could see them. He never hit me hard enough to send me to the hospital. He knew exactly how far he could go without leaving evidence. The volunteer work, my sister said suddenly, at the women's shelter. Was that? I nodded. It was the only thing he let me do alone. He thought it made him look good, having a wife who did charity work. I used their resources to learn about abuse patterns, safety planning, legal options. I was gathering information, waiting for the right moment. I just never thought the moment would come like this. Brandon walked back inside, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. My lawyer will have papers ready by morning, he said to Garrett. She can have the house. I'll move my stuff out this weekend. Tonight? My father said. His voice was hard, uncompromising. You pack a bag tonight and you leave. You can come back for the rest when she's not there. Brandon's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I could see him calculating whether to fight this, whether to push back. But Garrett still held up his phone like a weapon, and my father stood between Brandon and me like a wall. Fine, Brandon spat. He stormed upstairs and we could hear him moving around in our bedroom, the bedroom where he'd cornered me against the dresser and explained in careful detail what would happen if I ever embarrassed him in public again. The bedroom where I'd taught myself to sleep so lightly that any movement would wake me, just in case. He came back down 20 minutes later with a duffel bag. He looked at me one last time, and I saw the promise in his eyes. This isn't over. But he didn't say it out loud. He couldn't, not with witnesses everywhere. The lawyer's office is at 9 a.m., Garrett said. Don't be late. After Brandon left, the house felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. My family didn't know what to say. They kept hovering, offering tea and food and company. I appreciated it, but also felt suffocated by the attention. For 5 years, I'd hidden this secret so carefully. Now it was exposed. Raw, impossible to ignore. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house. My mother had kept it exactly the same, down to the posters on the walls and the blue bedspread I'd picked out when I was 14. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, processing what had happened. In one afternoon, my entire life had exploded and reassembled into something unrecognizable. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won. You think his recordings will protect you. You have no idea what's coming. I deleted it immediately, but my hands were shaking. Brandon had friends. He had money. He had connections. Even if Garrett's evidence was damning, Brandon wouldn't go down without a fight. The next morning, Garrett picked me up at 8:30. He looked like he hadn't slept either. In the car, he said, I know you probably hate me right now. I don't hate you, I said. You should. I knew. Maybe not the extent of it, but I knew something was wrong. He'd make jokes, show me pictures, tell me stories about putting you in your place. I laughed along. I thought it was just guy talk, exaggeration. I told myself it was none of my business. Why did you finally do something? He gripped the steering wheel tighter. My sister. She just left an abusive marriage last month. When she told me what she'd been through, I heard Brandon's voice in every story. I realized I'd been complicit in the same thing I was watching destroy her. I couldn't live with that anymore. We pulled up to the lawyer's office. Brandon's car was already there. Inside, his lawyer had prepared the paperwork exactly as demanded. Divorce petition, property settlement agreement, everything in my favor. Brandon signed each page with furious, aggressive strokes. He wouldn't look at me. When it was done, his lawyer tried to talk him into negotiating. This is financially devastating, Mr. Mitchell. You're giving up hundreds of thousands in assets. We should at least try to mediate a more equitable distribution. My client is satisfied with the terms, Brandon said through gritted teeth. File it today. Outside, Garrett walked me to my car, which my brother had driven over. I still have all the files, he said. They're backed up in 3 different places. If he comes near you, if he tries anything, I'll release them immediately. Thank you, I said. It felt inadequate for what he'd done, but I didn't have better words. Don't thank me, he said. I should have done this years ago. He paused, then added, I'm testifying at my sister's divorce trial next week. Against her husband. I've got recordings of him too. Guess I've been documenting everyone's confessions for years without realizing it would matter. The divorce was finalized in 8 weeks. Colorado had a mandatory waiting period, but Brandon didn't contest anything. He moved out of state, took a job with a development company in Arizona. His parents sent me a letter apologizing for not seeing it sooner, for not protecting me the way family should. I never responded. I didn't know how to explain that it wasn't their fault any more than it was mine. 3 months after the divorce, I was at the grocery store when I saw Brandon's sister, Natasha. She stopped her cart when she saw me, and I braced myself for confrontation. Instead, she pulled me into the coffee shop next door. I need to tell you something, she said once we sat down. Brandon is getting married again. Some woman he met at his new job. They've known each other for 2 months. My stomach dropped. Does she know? Natasha shook her head. She has no idea. He's doing the same thing he did with you. Love bombing, expensive gifts, constant attention. I tried to warn her, but she thinks I'm just a bitter ex-sister-in-law making things up. What can we do? Natasha pulled out her phone. Garrett gave me copies of everything. I'm going to send it to her. She deserves to know what she's getting into. Will she believe it? I don't know, Natasha said. But I have to try. I watched him hurt you for years and said nothing because family loyalty seemed more important than your safety. I'm not making that mistake again. She sent the files that afternoon. Brandon's new fiancé called them fake, accused us of being jealous and vindictive. She married him 4 months later. I tried not to think about it, tried to tell myself I'd done what I could. But late at night, I wondered if she was lying awake too, trying to figure out how to escape. I threw myself into work. I'd gotten my teaching license back during the marriage, something Brandon had grudgingly allowed because it made him look supportive. Now I took a full-time position at an elementary school across town. The routine helped. Planning lessons, grading papers, focusing on something other than the wreckage of my marriage. 6 months post-divorce, I was boxing up the last of Brandon's things from the attic when I found a journal. His handwriting, dated entries going back 8 years. Before we'd even met, I knew I shouldn't read it. It felt like a violation somehow, but I couldn't stop myself. The entries were chilling, detailed descriptions of previous relationships, strategies for control, notes on which manipulation tactics worked best. He'd written about me before our first date, planning exactly how he'd win me over, how long he'd wait before starting to isolate me, which family members would be easiest to turn into allies. It was methodical, calculated, sociopathic. I found entries about other women too. An ex-girlfriend from college who'd filed for a restraining order, A coworker who'd quit her job after he cornered her in the parking garage. A high school girlfriend whose parents had threatened legal action. Brandon had left a trail of destruction spanning over a decade, and he'd documented all of it like a hunter keeping trophies. I called Garrett immediately. He came over, read the journal, and went pale. "We need to give this to the police." "And say what?" "I found my ex-husband's diary, and it proves he's awful. Nothing in here is a crime. It's just thoughts. Some of these women might still want to press charges," Garrett said. "If they knew they weren't alone, if they knew there was evidence." We spent the next week tracking down names from the journal. Some had moved away, changed their numbers, made themselves impossible to find. But we found 6 who were willing to talk. Each had a similar story. Each had thought they were the only one. Each had been told by Brandon's family, friends, or their own relatives that they were overreacting, being dramatic, or misunderstanding his intentions. One woman, Christine, had been hospitalized after Brandon pushed her down a flight of stairs. He'd convinced the police it was an accident, that she'd been drinking and lost her balance. She still walked with a limp. When I showed her the journal entry where Brandon admitted pushing her because she'd threatened to leave him, she started crying. "All these years," she said, "I thought maybe I'd misremembered. Everyone told me I was wrong about what happened. His lawyer made me look hysterical in the deposition. I lost my case because I couldn't prove it wasn't an accident." We gathered statements from all 6 women. We compiled Garrett's recordings, the journal entries, medical records, police reports. We built a case that showed a clear pattern of escalating violence spanning over a decade. Then we took it to a prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence cases. She reviewed everything and sighed. "This is damning evidence, but most of it is too old. Statutes of limitation have expired. The recordings might be inadmissible depending on consent laws in the state. The journal proves he's dangerous, but it's not evidence of specific crimes I can charge." "What about the new wife?" I asked. "Can we use this to get her a restraining order?" "Only if she files for one herself. And from what you've told me, she's not ready to see him clearly yet." We left the prosecutor's office feeling defeated. All that evidence, all those women willing to come forward, and it still wasn't enough to stop him. Then, 2 months later, Brandon's new wife called me. Her voice was small, frightened. I didn't know who else to contact. "You were right, about everything." He'd put her in the hospital. Broken ribs, fractured wrist, concussion. But she'd recorded him during the assault, threatening to kill her if she told anyone what had happened. With her recording combined with everything we'd already gathered, the prosecutor finally had enough to file charges. The trial took 8 months. Brandon's lawyers tried every tactic. They claimed the journal was fake, that I'd forged it out of spite. They said Garrett's recordings were taken out of context. They brought in character witnesses who swore Brandon was gentle and kind. But one by one, 7 women took the stand and told identical stories. The pattern was undeniable. Brandon was convicted on 4 counts of felony assault and 2 counts of domestic violence. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. At the sentencing hearing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I almost declined. What could I say that hadn't already been said? But then I thought about all the other women sitting in the courtroom, about Brandon's current wife with her arm in a cast, about his sister Natasha who'd risked family relationships to do the right thing, about Garrett who'd thrown away a lifelong friendship to help a woman he barely knew. I walked to the podium and looked directly at Brandon. For 5 years, I said, "You made me believe I was crazy, that I was overreacting, that I deserved what happened to me. You isolated me from everyone who loved me. You monitored my every move. You controlled every dollar I spent, every friend I talked to, every moment of my day. You made me feel like I was drowning. And then you'd throw me a rope just long enough to catch my breath before pushing me under again." Brandon stared at the table, his jaw tight. "But here's what you didn't count on," I continued. "You didn't count on your best friend having a conscience. You didn't count on your sister choosing what's right over family loyalty. You didn't count on 6 other women being brave enough to come forward. You didn't count on me surviving long enough to see this day. You thought you were untouchable. You thought your charm and your money and your family connections would protect you forever. You were wrong." The courtroom was silent. I looked at the other women, at Garrett, at my family sitting in the front row. These people saved my life. They showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, that breaking the silence isn't betrayal, that family loyalty means protecting victims, not abusers. I turned back to Brandon. "I hope you use these 11 years to understand the damage you've caused. I hope you learn that women are human beings, not property to be controlled. But honestly, I don't care if you do, because I'm free now, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure other women find their freedom too." After the trial, I quit teaching and went back to school for a degree in social work. I started volunteering at the women's shelter full-time, the same one where I'd learned to recognize abuse patterns during my marriage. Eventually, they hired me to run their legal advocacy program, helping other survivors navigate the court system. Garrett and I stayed in touch. He married a woman named Melissa who worked as a trauma therapist. They had a daughter, and he brought her by the shelter sometimes to help organize donation drives. He'd become an advocate in his own right, speaking at men's groups about recognizing domestic violence and overcoming the bystander effect. One afternoon, about 3 years after Brandon's sentencing, I got a call from the prison. Brandon wanted to add me to his approved visitor list. I almost laughed. Then I almost cried. Then I just felt tired. I called Garrett. "Should I go?" I asked. "Do you want to?" "I don't know. Part of me needs to see him locked up, to make it real. Part of me never wants to see him again. Then don't go, Garrett said. You don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not closure. You already got your freedom. That's enough. He was right. I declined the request. But the call bothered me for weeks. Had Brandon changed? Was he sorry? Did it matter? I discussed it endlessly in therapy, in my support group, with other survivors at the shelter. The consensus was always the same. Abusers rarely change. And even if they do, victims aren't required to witness that transformation or grant absolution. 4 years into his sentence, Brandon came up for parole. The thought made me sick. I gathered the other women, and we all submitted statements opposing his release. We attended the hearing, a show of force. 7 women who refused to be silent anymore. The parole board denied his request. They cited the severity of his crimes, the number of victims, the calculated nature of his abuse. He'd have to serve at least 3 more years before he could apply again. Walking out of that hearing, Christine grabbed my hand. We did it, she said. We actually did it. We did, I agreed. But I knew it wasn't really over. Brandon would be released eventually. He'd go back into the world with the same charm, the same manipulation tactics, the same fundamental belief that he was entitled to control women. We couldn't stop that. All we could do was warn people, share our stories, and hope that someone would listen before it was too late. 5 years after the trial, Brandon's ex-wife, the one who'd finally helped us put him away, started a nonprofit for domestic violence survivors. She asked me to join the board. We created a database of convicted abusers, resources for victims, training programs for law enforcement and healthcare workers on recognizing abuse patterns. We lobbied for stronger domestic violence laws, better enforcement of restraining orders, harsher penalties for repeat offenders. The work was exhausting and often heartbreaking. For every woman we helped, there were dozens more trapped in situations they couldn't escape. Every time I met a new client at the shelter, I saw myself 8 years ago, scared, confused, convinced somehow that the abuse was my fault. And every time I told them the same thing. You didn't cause this. You can't fix him. The only thing you can control is getting yourself to safety. Sometimes they listened, sometimes they went back to their abusers, and I'd see them again months or years later, more beaten down, harder to reach. Those were the cases that kept me awake at night, the ones I couldn't save. But there were victories too. Women who left and never went back. Women who pressed charges and testified and got justice. Women who rebuilt their lives piece by piece, who went back to school or started careers or reconnected with families they'd been isolated from. Women who stood up in court and told their stories without shame or apology. I kept Brandon's journal locked in a safe. Sometimes I'd take it out and read the entries about me, about his calculated plan to break me down slowly. It didn't hurt anymore. If anything, it reminded me how much strength it took to survive. He'd thrown everything at me, every manipulation tactic in his arsenal, and I was still standing. That meant something. 7 years after Brandon went to prison, Natasha called me. Brandon's getting out next month, I thought you should know. My stomach clenched. I'd known this day was coming, but hearing it out loud made it real. Is he moving back here? I don't know, she said. He cut off contact with the whole family after the trial. None of us have heard from him in years. I reached out to the other women. We'd formed a tight bond over the years, checking in regularly, supporting each other through triggers and setbacks. They deserved to know too. We met at the shelter, 7 women who'd survived the same man, who'd turned our collective trauma into action. What do we do? Christine asked. Just wait for him to hurt someone else? We warn people, I said. We put his face and name everywhere. Social media, community groups, dating apps. We make it impossible for him to operate in secret. Isn't that harassment? One of the other women asked. He's a convicted felon, I said. His information is public record. We're not making false accusations. We're just making sure people know the truth. We created a website, Brandon Mitchell, a documented history of abuse. We posted court records, news articles about the trial, quotes from the judge's sentencing statement. We included a timeline of his victims, what he'd done to each of us, and how the pattern had escalated over time. We made it the first result when anyone searched his name. Within a week, we got a cease and desist letter from Brandon's lawyer. We forwarded it to our own lawyer, the one who'd been helping us pro bono for years. She reviewed the website and confirmed we were on solid legal ground. Everything we'd posted was factual, public information. Truth was an absolute defense against defamation. Brandon was released on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, his new apartment complex had evicted him after residents found our website and complained. By Friday, he'd been fired from the warehouse job he'd lined up while in prison. His employer didn't want the liability or bad publicity. Part of me felt guilty. Was I destroying his chance at rehabilitation? Was I becoming the villain in his redemption story? But then I'd remember the journal entries, the methodical planning, the complete lack of remorse in everything he'd ever written. This wasn't a man who'd made mistakes. This was a predator who'd been temporarily caged. 3 months after his release, Brandon moved to a different state. We expanded the website to include his new location. We contacted domestic violence organizations in that area, gave them his information, asked them to keep watch. Some people called us vindictive. Some said we were preventing his reintegration into society. But dozens more thanked us. Women who'd matched with him on dating apps and found our website before meeting in person. Employers who'd Googled him before hiring. Neighbors who'd recognized him and checked online. We'd created a scarlet letter that Brandon couldn't remove, and I wasn't sorry. 10 years after he'd hit me at that birthday party, I sat in my office at the shelter reviewing a new client's intake form. The details were familiar. Isolation, financial control, escalating violence. The abuser's name was different, but the pattern was identical. I scheduled her appointment, pulled out the safety planning checklist, and prepared to walk another woman through the steps I'd learned firsthand. This is my life now. Not the one I'd planned, not the one I'd dreamed about when I married Brandon, but a life that matters, a life that helps, a life built on the wreckage of what he tried to destroy. My phone buzzed. A text from Garrett. Just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I'm good, I replied. Really good. And I meant it. The nightmares had mostly stopped. The hypervigilance had faded. I could sleep through the night without jerking awake at every sound. I'd started dating again, slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries and an acute awareness of red flags. I'd even let someone get close, a man who worked construction and coached Little League, and thought my advocacy work was remarkable rather than threatening. That evening, I drove past my old house, the one Brandon and I had shared. The one where I had learned to make myself small and quiet and invisible. New people lived there now, a young couple with a baby. I watched through the window as the husband bounced the infant while the wife cooked dinner. They were laughing about something. Just a normal Thursday night in a normal house. That could have been me, I thought, if Brandon had been different. If I'd never said anything about the China set. If Garrett hadn't been recording. If 30 people hadn't witnessed that slap. But it wasn't me. My life had gone a different direction. One I never could have anticipated. And somehow, impossibly, I'd ended up okay. More than okay. I'd ended up doing work that actually mattered, helping people who needed it, using my worst experience to prevent others from suffering the same way. I drove to my parents' house for dinner, the same house where I'd slept in my childhood bedroom the night Brandon left, where my mother had made tea while I fell apart, where my father had made phone calls to lawyers and tried to understand how he'd missed the signs. They were better now too. We all were. The guilt had faded, replaced by a shared understanding that abuse is designed to be invisible. That's how it works. That's why it's so hard to escape. Over meatloaf and mashed potatoes, my younger brother told a story about his new girlfriend. She's great, he said. Really independent, has her own career, doesn't take any of my nonsense. His eyes flicked to me. I'm trying to do better, be better. After what happened with you and Brandon, I don't want to ever become that kind of man. You won't, I said, because you're aware, because you're trying. That's the difference. After dinner, I drove home to my apartment, the one I'd rented with my own money, decorated with my own choices, filled with my own things. No one monitoring my phone, no one questioning where I'd been, no one making me account for every minute or penny, just silence and safety and the profound relief of being alone by choice rather than by force. I made tea and sat on my balcony watching the sunset. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the shelter. I'd meet with clients, review safety plans, make calls to lawyers and police and housing advocates. I'd fight the same fights I fought every day, pushing against a system that still didn't take domestic violence seriously enough, that still blamed victims, that still let abusers manipulate their way out of consequences. But tonight, I just sat and breathed and remembered what it felt like to almost lose everything, and what it felt like to get it back. Not all of it. Some things Brandon had taken permanently, but enough, more than enough. I'd survived. We'd all survived. And we'd turned that survival into something that mattered. My phone buzzed again. A message from Christine. Just helped a woman leave her husband tonight. She's safe now. In a shelter 3 states away where he'll never find her. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled and typed back. That's 7 this month. We're getting good at this. We are, she replied. Almost like we've had practice. The sunset faded to darkness. I finished my tea and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new stories that would break my heart. But tonight, I could rest. Tonight, I could remember that even when everything falls apart, there's always the possibility of building something better from the pieces. Brandon had tried to destroy me. Instead, he'd forged me into someone stronger than I'd ever been before. Someone who wouldn't be silent. Someone who wouldn't let other women suffer alone. Someone who knew that asking for help wasn't weakness but courage. Someone who understood that family loyalty meant protecting victims, not perpetrators. I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. Safe, free, whole. This is my life now. And it's mine. Finally. Completely, irrevocably mine. No one can take that away. Not anymore. Not ever again.